Hi, everyone. My name is Brett Blease. I'm a Principal Technical Support Engineer. My main focus is still the QlikView product line. And as of now, I've been with the company 14 years and 4 months. And with that, let's get started with today's agenda. The main part of the presentation is going to be what's new in November 2018 or 12.30 if you're used to the old numbers. And I am including both the initial release and the new service release 1 that just came out last week as well. I'm also going to cover upgrade notes related to the new release. And I'm also going to do an overview of a new article I posted probably a month or 2 months ago related to management and distribution service best practices in the config files for both of those services. We'll cover some settings that you can tweak to increase performance in your environment or handle some other issues that may be occurring. And then lastly, we'll cover some things to remember, takeaways that you want to hone in on going forward. And with that, let's jump in. So the first thing that's new, still provide full support for IPv4, but we've added support for IPv6 now. That is fully supported, and along with that, we have dual stack support for both 4 and 6. And just an additional note on this, if you are going to switch to IPv6, be aware that if you're using certificate trust, which is in lieu of AD groups, that's during the installation process for QlikView Server Publisher. There's that dialog that pops up that asks you whether you want to use certificates or security groups. So if you choose the certificate option, be sure you check the help, and we'll include a bunch of links to the help pages. So be sure and check that, and you'll see the link in there to get to the help for IPv6. And just review, there's some settings and stuff you'll need to tweak in order to make sure that everything functions properly for you there. I want to cover one known issue that we ran into at a customer just last week that was using IPv6. If you are running multiple QlikView server resources in your environment, and let me just show you real quick what I mean. So over here in the management console in System Setup, under your QlikView servers, if you have more than one QVS resource here, you want to be aware of this issue, and it relates to the licensing. There appears to be a bug in that with the multiple resources, the licensing gets a bit confused as to which license that resource is supposed to be using. So the workaround we used in this case was to provide a new license that included the total number of cluster nodes and CALs that were needed for the environment. So we do have a workaround, but R&D will address that in either a patch build or in the SR2 release. We have a new trigger in Publisher called File Exists. I suspect this is going to excite quite a few people because this is a fairly popular thing that people want to do. This basically allows you to do a check for a file. So if you've got a backend system that creates a file that then is used by Publisher to pull in additional data, now you've got a way to set a trigger based on the existence of that file. A key note to this new trigger, you have to be sure that you remove the file after the task is triggered. So what you'll need to do is create the task for the file exists trigger, and then what you'll need is an unsuccessful completion of that task. You'll need another task that'll be a command line that'll go out and delete that file so that the trigger doesn't keep firing until a new file actually appears out there. And I'm just going to do a quick show here of how this works. I'll go back to my management console. This is under supporting tasks on the system tab, and what you're going to do is click on external program, click the green plus button, and down here in file exists is the new trigger. So you just click this, you put the path and the actual file name in the path block as well, and then give it a name, and then set your trigger, and then just do apply, and then you've got that trigger set, and the system will keep checking for existence of that file. I don't know exactly how often the check occurs, but it's going to basically be continually looking to see if that file exists. And then what you would need to do to remove it you're going to want another external program task, but you're going to want to use a command line statement. So you could either do a bat file or a CMD file that would simply use, like a command delete to delete that file to clear that up afterward. Okay. All right. Let's move on to the next feature. Next, we have the QlikView Server Engine Log, or the QIX log. This is a new log that basically gives you telemetry information on your applications. So if your developers have been struggling to try to do really good performance testing of their apps before they put them in production, this new logging could potentially help them. If you run log level 2 or 3, there are additional settings that you have to configure. You basically set the thresholds in those cases, so be sure you do that configuration if you enable things. For log level 5, I have run this. It generates a huge amount of information. So be very careful. This is not something you're going to want to run in production. You definitely want to do this in a dev environment only. So, but be aware that if you run 5, you're going to get a ton of information, but it will likely be very helpful to you. And I've got a couple links here, a telemetry study and a sense article. Let me just jump back to my web browser. These are related to QlikSense, just FYI, but the information is basically the same. But I kind of want to just include these, but this will kind of give you an idea of the data that you can pull out from that logging. So that's that one, and then this is the article that I also included. It's got some information on settings and those settings that you need to set as far as thresholds and things. And the help links are in there as well. But basically, let me just show you real quick. Here's the help for this one, enabling QIX performance log, and this covers the setting and how to do things and what you get out of it. So we've got that information there for you. All right, let me go back to Management Console there. And let's go to our next feature. We also have a new distribution service task performance summary. Adds an additional line containing performance information. There's 2 of them here. I'll just cover these both. So we have a distribution service task performance summary and a distribution service reload performance log. So let me just show you both of these at the same time here. Let me go to my notepad first. So in the actual task log, that first setting, what it's going to do is generate this additional line of information in the task log that's going to give you basically the overall stats. It'll tell you the PID, your peak physical memory, average virtual, and some other useful information. The settings, let me go ahead and show you those as well, are going to be in the settings ini. In I've included the path here, which I should go back in the link file. I realized I just didn't put that in there, so I'll make sure that's in there for you too, so you know how to get to that. But this is going to be, these are the 2 new settings: enable QVB process summary and enable QVB reload metadata. So those go in the settings ini for the QlikView batch process, or the QVB.exe processes, just FYI. Okay, and there was one other thing here that, let me show you. So the reload performance log, that is going to go into program data, QlikTech distribution service task results. You'll see these reload metadata files. And let me show you what one of those looks like. You basically just get a ton of information related to that task that the developers may be interested in, or you. I haven't played around with this a whole lot myself, but I just wanted to show you because the documentation on this right now and where to find this isn't very good. So again, I'll try and be sure this is documented. I may do an article on this just to improve that, and I'll include that link after the fact for you guys. Okay, let's go to the next one. This one I'm just going to touch on because I haven't really worked with this, so I can't provide a whole lot of additional information. But basically, the you can load full tables now using the Analytics Connection server-side extension. In trying to read up on some details, you used to have to loop through things, whereas now you can pull in the full table. You don't have to do the looping like you used to. Okay, let's go to the next one. We have some new features in the management console. Now via the status services area, all the .NET services, which are the management service, directory service connector, distribution service, and the QlikView web server settings service, we specify on each of those services if things have been changed in the config file. So we specifically point out which item has been changed and what the new value is and what the default value was. We also cover anomalies, and where this comes in, if you have a clustered environment. So say you have a clustered publisher license, so you can have multiple publisher nodes. There are some settings, which I'll cover later in the presentation, that you only do on a single node. So in that case, this anomaly is going to show, and it's going to show on the node that has the delta. So if it's true on one node and false on all the others, that's going to show up as an anomaly, just to point out to you that we've got that. This should be very helpful to us in support when we're initially trying to help you troubleshoot things. We can quickly take a look at the management console now and see what's not default. So that may give us a clue right off the bat as to what's going on. And let me demo this. We'll go back to the management console. Let me go to the status tab and then click on services. And as I click on the .NET services, this is the section we're talking about, non-default config values. And it gives you the settings. So in my case, I'm running certificate trust in my local machine. So I'm not using the security group. I'm using a certificate, our self-signed certificate. So you can see I've got the use when authentication setting. My value is false. The default value is true. So you'll see that on all of the services here, including the web server. And the thing you'll notice is the QlikView server doesn't have this. That's by design at the moment. The engineers are contemplating adding it at some point, but right now that doesn't exist, which I know would be a handy thing to have, but they chose to just do the .NET side initially here. All right. Okay, go to the next one. So in Service Release 1, the new feature there is we have a change to the ability to change the distribution service temp folder. Let me just show you real quick. I think I've got a, so let me go back to task results. Let me go back up here to distribution service. So in the one folder, so on the node, we have this temp folder. This is what we're referring to. You can actually change this. And the reason behind this would be if you have a clustered publisher environment again, and you've got this out on a file share, it's more efficient to have this temp folder local to each QDS node. So what you could do then is use this setting to point to a local folder instead of the file server, which should improve performance significantly because we don't have to go across the network to write those temp files. It'll be local, and that way we can write the file and then get it pushed out to either the folder distribution or up to the QlikView server for it to put out for the users to use. Okay. Okay, now we're into the upgrade notes section. So the first major system requirement change is November 2018 or 12/30 requires .NET Framework 4.7.2. This is the most current framework version Microsoft offers. It is part of the installation package. So as you run the server publisher install, it will do a check in the environment to see if the framework is installed. If it's not, it'll automatically prompt you to run that part of the installation. So there's nothing you need to do beforehand. It's built into our installer. So we'll make sure we do that for you if you don't have it available. As part of that, we had to drop support for the initial Windows Server 2008 release as it doesn't support 4.7.2. But 2008 R2 is still supported. So honestly, haven't run across too many customers that are on that 2008 initial release at this point. Most everybody's on R2 or 2012 or 16 at this point. If you are running Windows 10 by chance, you know, if you're doing demos and things, make sure you have build 1607 or higher. And what you can do to check that is just open up a command prompt and type in winver. And that'll give you the build number of Windows 10. So you can check to make sure you've got 1607. If you don't, just go to Windows Update and get that feature release applied to get yourself current. So that'll work for you. Okay, the next thing, and this one's fairly significant. We've implemented a new graphics library from Skia.org. One of the main reasons is it's a dual platform, so it's both Unix and Windows based. So it gives us some options moving forward. This replaces the old Microsoft GDI Plus library, which Microsoft stopped supporting a while ago. So we basically needed to get off of this library because there is no support for it any longer. The Skia library is going to utilize more CPU and memory, but you're going to see significant performance improvements in chart rendering, and you're going to see much crisper text in the visualizations as well. So the user should be, there should be a big feature that the users will enjoy. But just beware that you will see an uptick in CPU and memory. So what will happen is we'll probably have a little less space for caching, but as long as you've got enough resources on the box to where we were able to cache, everything should still be fine. You shouldn't have to make any major changes to your environment. You'll just notice that we cache less to account for the extra CPU and memory usage in the graphics engine now. I mentioned font rendering improvements. Things will appear crisper than the GDI Plus library. And then there is one known issue with desktop clients, which let me bring mine up. This may be a little hard to see, but for developers that have high resolution screens, i.e. 4K, or in my case, I have a Surface Pro 3, which has a high-res screen on it. You'll notice here, based on all the other text I've got, that things are really big, but here you'll see it's quite small. There is a setting that you can do to the QlikView.exe process. You just go to the properties of QlikView.exe and the compatibility settings, I believe. There's an article on this. I'll make sure I get that added to the text file that we'll post with the recording, with the article link to how to change that. I prefer to leave mine small. Everything renders perfectly that way. But the other thing you're going to notice is that any charts, the charts are going to render much more quickly with the Skia engine. It's been apparent to me in going through things. And if I go to the Sparkline one, all this was cached, by the way. That's why it's coming up so quick. But you'll notice a much faster rendering on things going forward. So this one's a major one. Okay, this next one has already confused a few people. We introduced BNF checking. This has to do with some syntax in the script, which was introduced in 1220. And we introduced a setting called Enable BNF Reload, which you could set to 0 to turn off the syntax checking, which most customers did because they didn't want to deal with having to go through their scripts and correct the syntax issues. Basically has to do with brackets and semicolons and quotes. Things need to be a specific type sometimes in order for things to run properly. So the key thing for 1230 November 2018 is the engineers have removed the ability to disable it. So even if you have the enable BNF reload equals 0, it will be ignored in 1230 or November 2018. So you will have to go fix those syntax issues in your scripts in the new release. You won't be able to disable things to keep them running. So just be aware of that. Okay, another major thing, we implemented some international components for Unicode updates. These basically have impacts on time zone values, improved sorting for Japanese language, sorting of V and W in Swedish language, handling white space and strings, different sorting of numeric strings containing hyphens, and update of set variables. This is in the release notes, so again, be sure you read the release notes. There's additional information in there. I just wanted to touch on this. I am making note of the settings that are associated with these. I'll try to put together an article on this. There isn't one currently. I just kind of learned about this myself the other day. So I'll try and get some more information on these. You can turn things off right now That may change in a future release, just FYI, kind of like the BNF setting. But right now, the settings are there. Everything's on by default, but things can be turned off if you find that you need to do that. So right now, what I would suggest, if you run into this situation where you need something to behave the old way, let us know and we can help you figure out which way you need to change that setting. Okay, now we'll get into the best practices section. I'm going to start with the management service first. And the first section I'm going to cover is related to document administrators. And let me just jump back to the management console real quick. So for those of you who don't know about document administrators, if you've got Publisher, you have the ability in your source doc area or your source folders, when you specify your folders, you can add document administrators down here. So if you add specific developers in this area to specific folders, they are then a document administrator, and they can configure their own tasks on those applications in that path. So they can see the status and documents tab in the QMC to be able to do that stuff themselves. But what you're going to want to do is check, let me bring up my management service config file. So here's the management service exe config. These are all of the settings. The ones we're going to be looking at are down here in this area, which is in the QlikView management service backend section. So these are going to be the ones I'm talking about in here. So let's go back to the presentation. So the first one is document folder admin cache enabled. It is, I can't remember if it's enabled by default or not. But this basically enables the caching of the document admin document combinations. So you're going to want to make sure this is enabled if you are using document administrators feature. If you're not using that feature, you can disable it. And I'm pretty sure the setting is disabled by default, just FYI. The next one related to this is document folder admin cache expiry in minutes. This controls how long we cache this piece of the document admin doc combinations. The default value on this one's 15 minutes, which is quite low and won't really result in much of a performance improvement. If your doc admins stay static as far as the people assigned to those folders, you can bump that value to a day, a couple days, a week. Basically push it out if things are fairly static. But a day shouldn't be a problem. And what that'll do is, so the first admin in, the first time they're in for the day, that might be a little slow rendering the management console, but from then on, it should be fairly quick for them to get back in and do things. And then the last one relates to multi-domain environments. This folder admin use cross-domain. This one is enabled by default. So if you don't have a multi-domain environment, you can pick up a bit of an improvement in the management console by turning off that feature. So set it to false instead of true if you just have a single domain environment. Okay? All right, so the next section, these are just some other common settings. So the full task status, refresh interval minutes. This is for the interval retrieving task from the distribution service. This is 30 minutes by default, I believe. What this does, this one relates to if you restart the distribution service, there can be, when you go back into the management console, there can be a sync issue related to some of the tasks still show as running even though they've completed. This is that interval to where we do a sync between the QMS and QDS to get everything back in a line again. So if it annoys you that things are out of sync, you can change that interval to a lower value at that point to fix that. Next one is get QDS info timeout in milliseconds. And note I've marked this as hidden. So for the settings that are hidden, let me just go back to the config file again. What you're going to want to do, basically, it means a setting doesn't appear here in the config file. So all I do is I just grab the key line and the comment line above it and copy one of them, and then just paste that back in, and then paste that setting name and the value you want, and then just put the help text in there so you know what that is as a new value. And then just set that, save the file, and restart the management service, and it'll pick up that new setting for you. This one basically relates to, it's a timeout for checking if the distribution service is alive. So if you have a very busy environment and your management service log is showing that we're having timeouts related to getting a response from the distribution services, you can increase this timeout to make those messages go away in the logs. So if the log is annoying you, go ahead and increase that value to whatever you need it to be, and that should get rid of those for you. Same thing for the get source document timeout seconds. This has to do with getting the source doc list on the management console document source documents. So if you're timing out there, we may need to increase that timeout value. Just go ahead and add the setting and increase that. That should take care of the problem. This next one is most everybody's probably heard of at some time, the QMS chunk size. In the new releases, say late 12.10, 12.20, and 12.30, you should be able to leave this at 100. There shouldn't be a problem with that value. In very large environments, we may need to adjust this up or down depending on what we're seeing in the log. So if you are seeing a problem related to tasks not starting or some tasks don't appear properly in the management console, open a case with us. We'll take a look at things and we'll try and help you figure out what chunk size value you should set to address that issue. Next one is show reload engines. Let me come back to the management console and explain a couple things related to this one. So this is going to be related to here. If you set that setting, what you'll see is distribution services here if you have publisher, but you also see a reload engine section appear. And where you'll get a reload engine added to an environment is if you add another QVS resource under QlikView servers. We don't automatically assume that that's going to attach to your publisher resource. It creates its own reload engine resource when you add that resource. So if you want to get rid of that, because what it'll do is if you don't install the QDS service on that environment, you'll get an orange banner up here in the management console that basically says that that reload engine is offline. So if that's annoying you, go ahead and set reload engines to true. You'll be able to see that, and then you'll see an entry like this one under there, and there'll be a delete mark next to the pencil to where you'll be able to delete that reload engine. And then once that's gone, then that banner should go away in the management console as well. All right. And now we're into publisher or distribution service settings. So the first one I want to cover is enable advanced file purge. This is a hidden setting. The key thing with this setting is you only want to enable this on one of your publisher cluster nodes. You don't want to enable it on all of them, just one of them. And this is noted in the article that I've written up on all of these settings, just FYI. So what this does, normally in the management console, you have, if you edit a task or delete a task, we delete it in the QVPR files, but we don't delete it over in the distribution service application data folder. What this setting does is it causes the things that have been deleted in the management service side to also be deleted in the application data folder in the publisher side. So we do a much better job of cleaning up on the distribution service app data folder side when this is enabled. It'll get rid of task and trigger files and the result files of tasks that have been removed. So that'll help reduce the number of files. So this one's really important in large environments, or if you've got a ton of reloads occurring every day. It can be very useful to activate this. This one could be useful in a single node environment too, just FYI, but you would just do it on the single node in that case. The next one, trigger states, keep time in hours. This basically clears out entries older than the value you set in the triggers underscore GUID.xml. So that GUID is going to be the actual GUID value for each of your triggers. Again, these are all kind of meant just to keep things cleaner. in the QDS application data folder. So, if you're running a lot of tasks every day, you may need to change some of these timings to keep things a bit more clean. Next one, number of days to keep EDX result files. This one's been around a while. Default is 30 days. If you aren't using EDX triggers, you probably don't need to be keeping these, so you could change that to a day or a couple of days and then just let these delete, and that'll help keep things running more efficiently for you. Same thing on number of days to keep QDS logs. And the one thing I'll mention here, if you want to keep your task logs and stuff, just run a Windows scheduled task or something and robocopy to copy those out to a separate archive folder. And or you could simply use the governance dashboard to load things up that way and have that information available through the dashboard. Next one, number of days to keep task execution history. Same thing, basically number of days to keep the execution history items. So again, if you got a large environment, you may want to change this from the default to a lower number to be sure we're not cluttering things up too much and impacting performance of the publisher side. The next one, notification folder. This one is somewhat new. This allows you in a larger clustered environment, the notification folder basically grabs some of the more regularly used publisher files. Let me see here. Let me go back to file browser. So up here, what it does is it takes some of these XML files in the Program Data QlikTech Distribution Service folder and moves those to a separate folder. So it can be beneficial in a very busy environment to split those out so that just the log information is going to the normal spot, and we have these on either a separate file server or a separate drive. That can improve performance of the environment as well. This is covered in an article, but I've got some information in the article that I've got, but there are other articles on this one as well, just FYI. Task result cache update, max task per thread, and the next one, task result cache update, sleep time between updates. These two kind of go together. The first one, normally you shouldn't have to change, but if you do have an environment with a large number of tasks, say a couple thousand or higher, and you've noticed the distribution service in the newer releases is utilizing more CPU cycles than it used to, making a change to this could reduce the CPU cycles for you and improve performance of the environment. So this first one, what you want to do is set it to the total number of tasks you've got in your environment plus a buffer. Basically, if you just round up, to the nearest 100 or 1,000s or something, should take care of it. Just make sure you leave yourself a buffer going forward. But that's what you want to do with the first setting. The sleep time, we've already fixed it for the newer releases. So the new default is 1,000 milliseconds. In the older releases, it was 200 milliseconds. So if you're seeing the symptom I described where the distribution service is using a higher amount of CPU than you think it should be, and the value is still 200, change that to 1,000 and then restart the distribution service. You should see a significant drop in CPU cycles on the service at that point. Okay, the next one is the one I referred to earlier in my presentation, the new QDS temp folder. Basically what it does is allows you to move the temporary folder location. Where this is going to come into play is in a cluster environment. That temp folder goes as part of the app data folder, which is going to be out on a file server because all the nodes need to have access to it. But when we're doing distributions, each QDS node can write to a local temp folder. We don't need that to go out to the shared folder because that node's the only one that's going to access it. So you can move that temp folder back to a local location on each QDS node. So you need to add this setting to each distribution service config file on each node, just FYI. And you could just set it to ctemp or cprogram data temp. Just put it somewhere local, and that should improve performance because we're not having to write across the network to a file share at that point. Okay. Next one. This one a lot of people don't run into, but we see a few cases, so I wanted to mention it, and it is in the best practices article. If you have a task that takes longer than a day to complete, you may have noticed that you can increase the 1440 in the management console. Let me just show you that real quick because you may not know what I'm talking about. So if I go over here to status, I have a task here. Let me just edit this task. And over here on the triggers, I have this timeout in minutes, which is 1440 is the default. If this needs to be higher than 1440, you can change it here, but it won't have an impact. The master setting is this setting, and you need to increase this. You need to add this to the config file because it's hidden, and then increase that value above 1440. And as soon as you do that, then when you change the setting in the management console, that will allow you that extra time for that task to complete. Open document attempts. There is a setting to where if you're having an issue with, we complete the reload, we save the file, but then when we try to open it to do the distribution, it fails to open properly. You can change the number of attempts to open the file for distribution to a higher value. So you can set it to 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. And that way, if the file system's lagging a little bit, that should allow that to wrap things up, and then we'll just keep trying until we can actually get it open for the number of attempts you specify. And then I've got the article here. Let me just show you this. So here's this article. I basically have it broken down into management service, and you'll see all the settings, and you can see I've got additional detail here. I give you the default values, some more information on what they do. And in the cases where they're hidden, I've provided which section to add the setting to. It doesn't really matter, but it should make it a little easier if you kind of keep them in the same area. So I just wanted to show you that too. And that link will be in the links doc I've showed you. All right, let's go. So to recap, things we want to kind of remember here, always read the release notes prior to upgrading. I can't reiterate that enough. I don't know how many customers we run into that don't read the release notes, that just go ahead and upgrade production and run into all kinds of problems because they're not aware of either new features or known issues or other things that end up biting them because they weren't aware of things. So be sure you read through the release notes before you do your upgrades. And in particular, check the new features, look for the known issues, and check the upgrade notes as well, just to see if anything there looks like it might impact you. And if you do have questions on anything, please reach out to us. Let us know. We're happy to do a call to kind of walk through things and try to confirm if something's going to be a problem or not for you. So I covered new features, upgrade notes, known issues. The Skia graphics library, just remember that will impact CPU and memory usage, so you're going to see a change when you go to 1230. But the users are going to see significantly better graphics performance. So the trade-off should be well worth it. And then the last thing, be sure you review the QDS best practices article for config changes for performance, in particular in clustered environments, but it can also have an impact in non-clustered on some of the settings. So just be sure you consider both of those. And with that, we'll switch over to question and answer.
Okay, so at this time, if you have any questions, please enter them in the Q&A panel.
Lots of great questions today. I'm going to try and get through all of them. I'm going to move fairly quickly here, so hopefully I'll catch as many as I can. First one I have is related to the for file exists feature. The question was, can you provide a file name that has a variable for something like today's date, so you don't have to delete the file every time you have a new date? Unfortunately, that is not the case. All we're doing is a check to see if the file exists. That's literally all that feature's doing. So you do need to get rid of the file, otherwise the trigger is going to keep repeating itself. Okay, next question. How do the new settings get into the settings ini during an upgrade? Basically, the config files for the settings that are not hidden, like I discussed, those will be included in the new version of the config file, so you'll be able to see those. But anything I marked as hidden, those you have to add manually, like I explained. And what I do is I just copy an existing one, paste it, and then overwrite the comment section with the new comment information, and then put the new setting value and the actual value with the things that need to be there. Next question, is it best practice to uninstall and then install the new release, or to let the installer perform the install? My personal preference is to uninstall and install rather than upgrade. So I know that all the files get updated within the environment, but running an upgrade should be fine. I just tend to be really conservative in this regard. The key, though, is to make sure you back up any files in Program Files QlikView that you've modified, because chances are those are going to get overwritten. And if it's something that we're not writing to a backup config in program data, those will get lost. So be sure you've got records of the changes you're making so you can double check those post-upgrade. Next question, any changes in the QlikView Web Server Authentication tab? And I hope I got that right. It was worded a little different. And as far as I know, there are no changes. The authentication features are still the same as they have been. I'm not aware of R&D looking to add any new, like SAML or something else at this time, but you never know when they're going to decide to start looking at that. So it's a possibility for the future, but right now it's the same as it has been for quite a while. Next question, upgrade from release 11.20 direct to November 2018 possible. Yeah, that should be fine. The only hiccups I've seen is on the QVPR schema updates. Sometimes when you start the management service, and that's something I don't know if I covered, when you do run the upgrade, the best practice would be to start the management service first, because he's kind of the chef in the kitchen. So he needs to update the schemas on all the QVPR files, et cetera, before he can really start talking to the other services again. So bring the management service up first, make sure it updates all the schemas on the QVPR files, and then it comes up without any errors. If that goes fine, start the other services, and you should be good to go. But if something hiccups in those schema updates, worst case, you just wipe out the QVPR, restore from the backup you took prior to the upgrade, and then just try and let the service redo the upgrade. Sometimes, for some reason, it will hiccup on the first try, and if you rerun it, a lot of times it'll run fine the second time through. Okay, next question. Have any of the API calls changed in behavior from the previous version, 1220 SR6 or 8, or have been deprecated? I'm not aware of any API changes, but what I would recommend is go to the help.qlik.com site, and the API stuff is all down in the QlikView developers section. So just for QlikView, there's a couple different areas, so just make sure you do the developers one. That's where all the APIs are, I believe. I've got that right, but if you don't find it there, just feel free to holler to send support. We can double check that for you and let you know where it is. Next question, the cross-domain setting for the, I forget which config that's in now, but the question was if it's only relevant to doc admins, and the answer is no, that's relative regardless of whether you're using doc admins. So if you have an environment that is just a single domain, setting that setting to false should improve management console performance, just FYI. Next question, QMS chunk size. They wanted to know if I could repeat the version where it shouldn't be necessary to change. As far as I know, I think 12.1 and later should be where you basically shouldn't have to change that setting. Pre-12.1 was where we had to tweak that. 11.2 for the most part, but I think 12.0 had some issues as well. But I'm pretty sure 12.1 and later, the default should work unless it's a specific scenario in your environment that requires us to adjust that. Next question, where can we find Brett's articles? There's going to be a list of links that will be posted with the recording. So I'll try and make sure I've got everything that I can think of in there for you guys. So anything I've referenced should be there. The thing I don't know, Troy can comment here in a second, is whether you guys have the ability to post a question, because if you do, you can do that, and then I can try and track things down for you that way. Or if you've got something and there is no place to post, just go ahead and submit a support case and just reference that it was my recording, and that should get back to me eventually to where I can try to get back up with you and get you what you need. Next question.
Support case would be best.
Okay. Next question is, does the enable advanced file purge also clear any document cals related to the QVW? Unfortunately, the answer to that one is no. The QlikView server service handles the .cal assignments. So you still need to go into your documents, user documents, and clear those cal assignments on that app, and then clear the actual .cals. So you've got actual people assigned, clear those, then clear the cals assigned to that app before you actually delete it. Otherwise, those will get stuck, as you probably know. Next question.
Okay, Brett, we've just got one more question.
Okay.
We're running out of time.
All right, let's do, I'm going to skip one here and do somebody asked about the .NET framework, the 4.7.2. That is part of our installation. We do check to see if it's installed. If it is not, we will run the installer for that. One key thing to note, though, after that runs, what I would do is run a Windows update right after that and check for any patches because I think it's probably just the base 4.7.2. So make sure you run Windows Update to get any patches available for it as well, so that you know you're current on that before you actually crank everything up full speed. And the rest of the questions, by the way, I'll get those answered, and those will post with the recording like Troy mentioned.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
We hope you enjoyed this session. Here's our legal disclaimer. And once again, thank you very much and have a great rest of your day.